I think that's a great question. And there's a distinction that I want to make is that you have to be delusionally optimistic for sure to like continue to do this business because we're in a low percentage business. If you sell, I was saying earlier, 10% of your pitches, that's amazing. If you sell 1 out of 20 spec scripts, that's amazing. So you have to believe that this is going to be the one, because like, why would you write 20 scripts to only sell one? It's just the numbers don't add up. So yes, you have to be delusionally optimistic. Every time I write something, I absolutely am like, okay, this is not only going to sell, it's going to be the biggest sale ever. It's going to be on the air.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Wow, you're going to love today's chat. David is driven, compassionate, honest, extremely clever, and a great teacher and leader in the screenwriting space. I came across David when for his birthday he wanted to give back to the community. His gift was to read people's script, which is a very kind thing to do, and out of 600 submissions he received, I was lucky to be one of the few selected, which gave me great confidence. This is an amazing thing to do. This helps the community grow. It inspires people. The list goes on. I think this was really awesome of someone who's achieved it all and wanted to help with no strings attached. Anyway, David's a mensch. He has amazing insights. I gained a lot, and I know you will too. So let's get into it and officially introduce David to the podcast. David H. Steinberg is a writer, producer, and director. He entered Yale at age 16 and earned his law degree from Duke before abandoning his legal career to attend USC's Peter Stark producing program. David's first spec sale, Slackers, became a cult classic movie, and he's had 10 films produced, including 3 in the American Pie franchise, the DreamWorks animated feature Puss in Boots, Disney's Tinker Bell, and the Pixie Hollow Games. As a director, David wrote and directed the award-winning short film The Babysitter, starring Academy Award-winner Brie Larson, and he also made his feature directorial debut on the romantic comedy Miss Dial. In television, he was nominated for a WGA Award for his work on The Simpsons, which is my favorite show, as well as written for a variety of animated and live-action series. He was the executive producer and showrunner of No Good Nick, an original series streaming worldwide on Netflix. Currently has another show in development at Netflix, as well as films at Disney and DreamWorks Animation. You can see why he's been in the industry for over 2 decades. It's an amazing chat. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a range of topics, such as breaking into the business, killing your screenwriting babies, being fired, working with his wife, becoming a showrunner, giving back, being delusionally optimistic, collaboration, disappointments, and expectations. Also, before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. So this could be a fun way to start. I love your birthdays. You have the best birthday gift on the entire planet. Please tell me a little bit about your birthdays and why you've decided to give back to people.
Okay, well, this is a new thing. Last year, I guess it was delirious from the pandemic. I don't know what it was. I just decided on my birthday, maybe it was because I was trying to get attention, so everyone would wish me a happy birthday. And I thought the best way to get attention would be to give something to other people. It can't be a purely altruistic reason. There had to be some selfish reason. But last year, I announced on Twitter that I would read scripts for my birthday. And there's, obviously a lot of people in the screenwriting Twitter community that are trying to break in, that have pilots that they would love a professional opinion on. I said, I'll read as many as I can just today only because it's my birthday. And I got 600 submissions. So then I kind of had to change the rules a little bit. I said, look, okay, first of all, I will extend it through the entire week. So it'll be my birthday week to read as many as I can. And I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to read them all, but I wound up reading about 60, so about 10%. And that's a lot of scripts to read, in a 5-day period. But, to be honest, there was an altruistic motivation. It wasn't just that I was trying to get attention, and I did get a lot of attention, by the way. But and new, if it's a good way to get new followers too.
Yep. You got me.
But yeah, so the other reason is that I've just been very lucky in my career, and I think when you first start out, there's a lot of, I think that when you break into the business and you start having success, you naturally think, well, it's your talent and that you deserve it and that you've earned every penny of the money you've made. But then you have your ups and downs and whatever. And with age comes wisdom, and you start to realize that some of the success was luck and some of the failure was bad luck, and that there's talent for sure. But so I've had a good career so far. It's been 20 years. I've earned my health insurance for 20 straight years. So that's not like the highest level of the career, but I've been doing great. And I just try to do things to pay back, because I wish I had a mentor when I was starting out. No one told me what I was doing. I was doing everything wrong. So if I can do a little bit to help other people, I'm here for that. And I think it's good karma for me. And, the other thing is, when I read someone's script and I give them notes, or I help someone, or a shout out or whatever, people really appreciate it a lot more than the time it costs me to do it. So there's kind of an incentive there, just because people really, really appreciate just a little bit of, all it takes is one person to help you out in this business.
You're a mensch, and you were that person to me. And it really helped me, gave me the confidence. And since then, with that particular script, I've written 7 probably in between.
Whoa, that many scripts? Wow.
We'll get onto it in a second, but you're actually one of the only people that have kind of clarified the way that I write. I heard you in another podcast. I know we're jumping the gun. We'll come back to this. I think you said you want to have so many projects where you don't know the project 100% off the top of your head. You want to actually have to look back at your notes, because that way you're not so attached. And I was writing the one script for 2 years, which is way too long. I don't regret it, but it's the first time I've ever written anything. I didn't know what I was doing. But then going back on this extreme, you're the only one that gave me this clarity that, I'm actually maybe doing it a bit differently to everyone, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It works for me. And to hear that you're doing the same thing is actually really empowering.
No, just thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's true that I try not to get too emotionally attached. Obviously, when you spend the time and energy to write something, you're going to love your characters. You're going to love your story. You're going to want to see it get made. But so much of it is out of your control. And even when you do have success and someone does make it, they change it. And you have to emotionally detach so that you're not crushed every time someone changes something. And you can celebrate the victories along the way. And part of that is to just have a lot of things going on in your own world, and have 10 projects and whatever. So if one of them, something bad happens to it, it sucks, but you're like, okay, well, I'll just focus on this other one instead. Yep. But a lot of writers, obviously when you're first starting out, you have to start out with one thing. No one's starting out writing 2 projects. So when you have that one script, it's your baby, and you just can't stand the idea of something bad happening to it. But I like to say, it's kind of like, you just need to be a 19th century, parent. You just have to have 13 kids. And if some of them die, that's why you had 13.
I like that, because what I've been hearing is kill your babies. And it was such a hard and foreign concept to me when I was first starting out. And this goes with everything. A lot of people can juggle multiple projects, and sometimes you need to know when to kill your baby. I still struggle with that. Have you had a history with this, or you've always known which baby to kill straight away?
No, I do everything the hard way. I did it by being traumatized. My first script when I broke in was Slackers, and that's the poster, the second one in the middle here. And that was the script that sold for a big amount of money. It was got me into the Writers Guild. It launched my career, and I was immediately fired from that project. Another writer took over. I mean, I didn't know how to navigate the minefield of working with real producers. and a real studio. And I got replaced on that project. And when that script came back to me after some other writer that I'd never met before rewrote it, I was heartbroken. I was crushed. I was like, oh my God, they took all my favorite things are gone. And then going to see it filmed on set, not my script, but based on my script. And then a director coming in, changing things. And you're just like, what is going on here? I thought that they bought the script because they liked it, not because they just thought it was like a good starting point. So that was devastating. And then as time goes on, you learn from that mistake to, be emotionally connected to the material and then let it go. I'm not saying write things that you don't care about.
Yeah.
I'm saying care and then move on if you can.
Well, it also helps just using me as an example because like using the two extreme examples, the first script that I had, if anyone gave like feedback, this is years ago, I've changed and I've evolved. I would not want to change the dialogue. I wouldn't want to alter the character. But now with what you're saying is that when you've written so many other things, you're less attached and you're more able to take on feedback and adapt and improve the script, for example. And I think that's really important in all facets of life. But what was that moment like? You said you didn't quite understand the industry and you were fired. So you sold this big script and then you get fired. That would have been like a big high and low, like a seesaw of emotional events unfolding.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster ride. I sold a big script. So I was in film school, and I went to USC in the producing program for graduate school. And I was writing during that time, and this was the third script I'd written. And that summer, this is 1999, to show you how old I am, American Pie came out that summer. And I was already writing something R-rated because my manager said, R-rated stuff look like it's going to be making a comeback, R-rated comedies. So I was writing this sort of teen comedy. American Pie came out and did really good business, made $100 million. And my script went out like 3 weeks later and it sold for a lot of money. It was progress to production, which means that they had to put it into production. So I was on the top of the world. And not only that, I actually got my first job after that only a month later, because based on this script selling, I then went to meet at Universal, and I got the job writing American Pie 2 in October. So I sold the script in September, and in October I got hired to write American Pie 2. So I'd already been hired for my next job. But then, when the deal was in place and it became time to rewrite Slackers as part of my deal, I didn't know how to navigate it because I didn't understand that it was supposed to be a collaboration. I thought, well, you guys liked what I wrote, so you must have not wanted to change much. So when I met with this producer, they had all sorts of ideas like, well, what if they did this? What if they did that? And I was like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. And so I just was very resistant to the process. And they're like, well, this, in their heads, we're thinking, well, this guy's, not collaborative, so we'll just get someone else. Like firing me to them was like ordering lunch. It was no big deal. It wasn't like that. Think about it. They were like, oh, that guy's not going to work out. He's gone. I mean, it was like that. And like probably after the first 5 minutes, they knew they were going to fire me. But so then, how do you recover from that? Then I was working on American Pie 2, and I got replaced in that one too. That one wasn't as much my fault. That was more a function of the writer of the first movie wanted to come back. And so I was like, sold a big project, got a big assignment, got fired. So that was like a pretty big up and down. Mm-hmm. And then there was a period for a few years where I was trying to figure out, okay, well, is that it? Did I just like break in and then immediately like my career's over? So trying to figure out and learn from your mistakes and figure out how to like have a career that has some longevity was a real challenge. It wasn't like I immediately like go, oh, well, here's what you do. It took years to like kind of build things back up again until I was like working pretty steadily.
It's very interesting because sometimes when we go through an experience like that, we might want to give up and think, the industry doesn't want me, and we can play like that victim mentality and say, I'm done with them. I'm going to go back to being a lawyer or whatever. What actually kept you wanting to be there? Because to have those highs and then the lows are then probably a period of not much work.
Right. Well, I mean, I love being in the business. I mean, I never wanted to go back to be a lawyer. That's like, I have nightmares about, like literally that is my most common nightmares. Like I'm back in my law firm and I'm like billing hours.
Same as me with accounting. So I resonate with you strongly.
so you know, and that's like an actual fear. It's not just something like, oh, that's my nightmare. It's like literally my nightmares are I have to go do that again. So I'm like, I love the entertainment business. I love writing. Do I want more creative control? Yes. But at the very least, I want to stay doing this and make a living doing it and earn enough money to not have to do something else. So, you know, I think that one of my greatest strengths is that I'm able to accept reality. And it's a sort of something that like my representatives often say. It's like if they say like, "Hey, look, this is not going to happen." Like I'm like, "Okay, I get it. So what else can we do?" You know, I'm not going to fight like when things don't go my way, and it's like it's not the news that I want to hear. I'm gonna get mad. I'm not like, you know, completely emotionless. I'm gonna like, you know, maybe go have a bender or something. But then I'm gonna regroup and be like, okay, so that got fucked up. Now what do we do? So what's the backup plan? What's plan B, C, D? Because this is my job, and I can't just be like, well, I'm gonna quit then. That if no one's gonna do it my way, then forget it. And I think that to a certain extent is has to do with keeping your ego in check.
Yeah.
You know, and the good thing about this business is that people are constantly telling you that you suck. So, you know, and like telling you no, and you try to sell stuff and people say no, or you sell it and then they doesn't get made, or they get made and they fire you and they hire someone else, whatever. There's constantly people. So even though I feel like I've achieved a certain level of success that a lot of people would be very jealous of, I don't think of myself as being like tremendously accessible because I'm constantly faced with like criticism and like people telling me no. So not that I undervalue where I am, but I try to be realistic. And as a conversation I have with my manager all the time, I say like, look, dude, I know how the industry perceives me. My wife and I are writing partners. So sometimes when I say we, it's both of us.
Oh, nice.
I say, I get it. We are showrunners, but we ran a show on Netflix for kids and family. And I'm not saying that that's nothing. That's something. That's a big fucking deal. And we ran a show for a whole year for 20 episodes, and we're legitimate showrunners. But then after we did No Good Nick, we had a general meeting at ABC, like the broadcast network, sorry. And we were talking about our, you know, just having come off doing a show that we were the creators and showrunners on. And the executive at ABC said, yeah, but have you ever done like a network show? And we were just like Netflix is like a YouTube thing that we were just kind of screwing around. It's not a real show. It's just Netflix. And like
Pretty
kids
big
and
deal.
families even worse because it's not like, oh, like you do stuff for kids. Like I think a lot of times people talk about animation that way. Like, oh, you do animation. That's so cute. Have you ever done anything like real? And it's like, you know, so
That'd
we
kill me.
get, I'm not saying that I think that that's the type of showrunners that we are, but we get that that is sometimes a common view that we can't walk into, you know, NBC and be like, look, as you know, high level showrunners, we demand blah, blah, blah. We get it. They think that like we're barely showrunners. So we're going to get a meeting, but they're not necessarily going to buy it. And like when we buy it, you know, whatever, we're used to being treated like shit. So as long as you have that like default, then, you know, it keeps you humble and it also keeps you realistic about what you can achieve.
The realistic concept is something that doesn't quite make sense to me because, for example, I've used this example 100 times on this podcast, but I think it's a great one. Is one lady, she was rejected maybe 20 times selling her book, but she knew she had something. And some people might say she's not being realistic, but you know, she kept on working at it. She improved at it. She did whatever she did. And then eventually she sold it. And now it's an international best-selling book. And there's that kind of, you know, some people might say, for example, one of my scripts is bad, and then I might get really good feedback. And it really depends on the situation, the circumstance. But this idea of being realistic makes no sense to me. How do you navigate that? How do you know when to actually not do something?
I think that's a great question. And there's a distinction that I want to make is that you have to be delusionally optimistic for sure to like continue to do this business because we're in a low percentage business. You know, if you sell, like I was saying earlier, you know, 10% of your pitches, that's amazing. If you sell 1 out of 20 spec scripts, that's amazing. So you have to believe that this is going to be the one, because like, why would you write 20 scripts to only sell one? It's just, the numbers don't add up. So I think especially, you know, when you're talking about to actors, it's even worse, but at least writers have a little bit more success percentage wise. So yes, you have to be delusionally optimistic. Every time I write something, I absolutely am like, okay, this is not only going to sell, it's going to be the biggest sale ever. It's going to be on the air. We just turned in a script to our representatives last week. In the email, I said, this is probably going to be a show on blank network. It'll run for 5 to 7 years. Really excited to start. And we just finished writing it. So they never read it. It hasn't sold. We haven't done anything, but I was like, this will be on the air for sure. So you definitely have to have optimism about everything you write and think that and fall in love with it and think it's going to be successful, whatever. That's not the realistic component I'm talking about. I think what is helpful is on the business side of things is being realistic about how people perceive you and what you're able to get based on where you are. So for example, if you are writing a spec pilot and you think it's amazing and maybe it is amazing, it's unrealistic that you're going to be the showrunner on that if it sells and gets made, if you've never been on a staff before. So that's unrealistic. So that's very unrealistic. Now, somewhat unrealistic is, okay, so what if you've like had a couple movies made and you've been a staff writer and then you sell a show? Now, are you going to be the showrunner? That's sort of unrealistic. It's possible, but probably not. So it's just like, what types of scenarios are realistic based on how the industry perceives you? That's, I think, where realism has to come in. And also like on the business, on a deal, if you know, when you're trying to keep your numbers in check, like, you know, what you think you might get paid versus what you're actually going to get paid. It's helpful to be realistic when you think you're going to get, you know, $100,000 and you're actually going to get, you know, $20,000. So don't be delusionally optimistic about the money.
Yeah.
Because that is not going to pay off. That's going to just make you mad. And like, for example, I'll give you another example. So in the first part of my career, I mostly did film. So I had probably about 10, I don't know exactly, but I think 10 films made. But I really wanted to do TV. And my wife and I executive produced a pilot for ABC Family that didn't go to series, but we had pilot producing experience. And, you know, we enjoyed that experience so much, we wanted to focus more on TV. And my manager in 2015 said, there's an opportunity to staff on a TV show. It's a kids and family show on Amazon. Are you interested? I said, absolutely. He said, let's be realistic here. I know you have all these movie credits, but you've never staffed on TV. And even though you've already executive produced a pilot, would you accept staff level, the lowest possible level of all the producing levels? Like in my head, I thought, well, maybe I'll be like, you know, co-executive producer, you know, the second highest level. I'm like, okay, maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe they'll make me like producer, like right in the middle. And then the reality was like, would you accept the lowest possible level at the lowest possible scale of, you know, salary? And to my credit, I said, yeah, I would do that. And it wasn't like I was, you know, flush with cash or like, was like, well, I'm so rich, I don't need the money. I needed the money, but I also needed the experience. So I took that job and it was the greatest decision I ever made. I learned so much being on staff. I working with the show. And look, the showrunner was a super great guy. We're total friends now. And he, you know, understood that I was like not a typical staff writer and that I had like directed a feature film and had produced credits and had made a pilot. So he was like, but also because he, you know, had been doing this a long time, he wasn't threatened by that. I was like, look, I'm not in here to like tell you you're doing anything wrong. I'm just here to learn. So I was a staff writer along with some other staff writers who had never worked in the business before, but it was a great experience for me. And, you know, it just goes to this question of like, if you just have this kind of unrealistic idea of where you think you should be in your career, you're going to be constantly disappointed because everyone's going to be trying to knock you down. No matter what you actually deserve, people are like, would you take less?
It's very interesting. What I'm hearing is that you have to be extremely flexible in this industry because even if you've written that one script, it might change 100 times by the time it's actually on air. but also huge. And I'm glad that you say it's a huge credit to you, because it really is the ego. In my mind, when I've written something, I have to be the showrunner. I've never done anything. I have to blah, 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 do all these things. And you've actually done all of these things. And perhaps that could be a bit of a ego, or it could even be a bit of a war in your head, because you've done so much. And then you're being told that perhaps you might perceive it as you're not good enough to do this one thing. We're putting you at the bottom.
Right.
But for you to be able to put that to the side and see like the overall picture of where it can lead you, I think that's phenomenal. And there's an example that springs to mind. I think I brought it up on a few podcasts ago. One of my friends was working full time, but he really wanted to be in the sports industry. And so what he did is he volunteered on weekends at sport clubs so that he could build himself up. And he didn't have all the money in the world, even though he was working full time, but he did that every week to build his skills up so that he could eventually transition and earn money in that field. Whereas other people were saying, you're not earning money, like show them your worth and all of this stuff. But he never once thought of it like that. If he didn't have that, then he wouldn't be able to work in the sport industry, which he's now doing. And that came purely because he put his ego to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. And it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, is it's about collaboration. You know, when I was first starting out and I had a big ego because I thought that this big spec sale meant that my value was that much, that I walked into that room and I was like, well, here's how it's going to be. And like, you're going to give me a bunch of notes. I'm not going to do those notes. Obviously that's the exact wrong thing to do. And so the main piece of advice here is keep your eye on the ball. And the goal is not to get your thing made or to get it to the creative control to do it the way you want it. The goal is to have a career. And I mean, that seems like surprising to some people, but any particular project, if like I told you like, hey, look, that script you spent 2 years writing, I'm going to set it on fire. No one's ever going to see it. It's never going to get made. But in return for that, you're going to have a perfectly wonderful career for 20 years. You know, you're going to start at the bottom, but you're going to work your way up. And then 10 years from now, you'll have some other show. You'd be like, of course I'll take that deal, right? No one's going to be like, no. But people constantly make decisions that go against that philosophy. They try to do things that are only about what they see in front of their face instead of the long-term prospects. And long-term prospects are about being a kind, collaborative person. Yes, talent is important, of course, but so is being someone that people want to hang out with. That's like a nice person that has good ideas, is a good problem solver, but is a collaborative person. If someone says, hey, I like your script, and I know this is going to sound like one of those stupid notes, but, you know, does it have to be, you know, a person? Can it be like a chimpanzee instead? And you're like, what are you talking about? And you're like, but it's this continuum also. Like, I'm not saying you should be a hack where you're like, okay, whatever you say is fine as long as you pay me. I don't care.
That's good. Yeah.
But it's like somewhere on the spectrum of like auteur, I only do what my creative vision tells me because I'm such a, you know, rare individual that has such creative talent that's never been seen before. You know, I'm Tarantino, I only can do my own thing, to like, I'm whatever you want me to do. You give me the money, I'll write it however you want me to write it. Somewhere in the middle there's, you know, personal integrity of how to like do things in a way that is respectful and in keeping with your voice and your talent, but also not like constantly telling people things that make them hate you. So it's about being collaborative. And like, if someone says chimpanzee and you say that sounds like a really stupid idea, then not only are you not getting that job, but now that person just had you call them stupid. So you just burned a relationship. Is there a version of it that you could tolerate where you, hey, well, you know what? I'm thinking about the chimpanzee. It's definitely not the way I wanted to go, but now I'm thinking about it. Maybe it's animated. I mean, is there a version of it where like, this could be cool? I don't know. Let me think about it. Let me try. So I'm not saying you have to say yes to everything, but don't say no to everything either.
Yep.
And like, when someone's giving you notes, whether they're paying you or not paying you, whatever, it's the hardest thing in the world is to like step outside of the box you've created and be like, well, what if it was something different than what I thought? I don't know. Maybe that's not the end of the world. And I'm not saying it's better. It's not necessarily worse. Let's try. And that's what you do in a TV writer's room is you try shit all the time and say like, okay, did it get better? I don't know. It's different, but it's not like we didn't make it worse. And that kind of collaboration leads to things that not only can make the show better, but even when it doesn't, it makes a relationship. And that's what you're trying to keep your eye on the ball, is that the relationship you make with someone who's like, you're sitting in a room and they're pitching ideas and you're like, that's cool, love it. Okay, what if we did that? Oh, and what about this? Oh, that's not good, but let's do this. And you spend all day and you're like working with them. It doesn't matter if that project turns out better. Ultimately, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, but it really, if that person can help you in your career and that person's like, I love this guy, he's so collaborative, I want to work with him on my next project and my next one after that. I mean, look at all the people who've like just like been on the coattails of like big stars like Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, and like, not that he's not talented, of course he's talented, but you know, when you find someone that you jive with, that you gel with, and that you just have a good collaboration, you know, if you have 10 of those people, you'll never not work.
It's really interesting. Even in the accounting world, in my brief experience there, the managers would pick, not necessarily, obviously you needed it to be okay, but they weren't picking necessarily on the best talent. They were picking on who do they want to sit in a room with for the next 2 weeks, month, or whatever. And I think that's so important in all fields. Obviously, you want to do the best piece of writing or project that you can, but as you're saying, it's so important, this collaboration. And I'm sure it would have been a bit of a transition for you, because you mentioned at the start you had no idea that this industry was collaborative, and now you've come in and now you're like the collaborative master, and you might not love an idea, but you can see how that can be beneficial long term. Was that a bit hard, or did you get it very quickly?
It took me a long time. I mean, it's not easy. I think it goes with, you know, just time, experience, having there be a lot of, once you've written many projects, then you're able to like be, like I said earlier, less emotionally attached to each individual one. But also you can always surprise yourself. You know, someone gives you an idea and your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, that's a dumb idea. If you just don't have that reaction and go, okay, maybe I'm thinking it, but I won't say it, and I just try it. You know, how many times when you look back, you know, a year later, and you look back on that and go, yeah, man, I remember thinking that was the dumbest idea in the world, but that's the show now. And if you just try things, and you're still going to be the one to try to make it work. It's not like they're saying it has to be this way in bad execution. You're going to do the good execution of maybe what seems like a bad idea, but all of a sudden it turns into a good idea. There's so many examples from experience of things that I thought were bad ideas that turned into pretty good ideas, because guess what? We made it work. And that's what your job is. You're a problem solver. And you know, when it goes to the types of people that have long careers, you were saying that it's about people you want to spend time with. And it goes to like something that we had a professor in film school that said that Hollywood's just like high school. There's two types of people. There's the smart people and the popular people. And the writers think of them as, we're all the smart people. We're like introverts. We like to sit home, write. We don't like people telling us what we're doing. Just come up with our ideas, generate the material, and be like, there you go. We're artists. Isn't it beautiful? It's like a painting. Don't touch it. It's done. But those are not the people that actually like run the business. The people that run the business are the popular people. So if you can like, and I'm not saying you have to all of a sudden be like some sort of, you know, wild party extrovert, like, and taking like, you know, schmoozing lessons. But by the same token, if you are a person that people like to spend time with, that would be hugely beneficial, even at the risk of being somewhat less talented. You would be more successful. There's plenty of people in this business who are not the most talented, but are like good in a room, good at pitching. There's people, everyone knows, like in TV writers' rooms, especially comedy rooms, there's like the people that kind of fail their way up because they just like suck up to the showrunner and like say like, oh my God, that's so funny. I love that idea. And they didn't contribute anything of their own. And the showrunner's like, oh, I love that guy. He's always, pitching me good ideas, but they don't really pitch anything. They just said your idea was good. So, I mean, I'm not saying be like that, but don't be 100% not like that.
That's actually so interesting. That would also drive me nuts that you have to, what I'm hearing is carry a bag of cocaine on you, enough for everyone so you can go out and party and everyone will. You heard it right here. No, I'm just joking. But it would drive me nuts that that's still that ego element of where the person above you still might have not done the work around ego and you still have to like suck up to them a little bit. I guess that's in all areas. But still, I would hate that. I would hate that you just want to be nice because you have to be nice. Sorry, you just want to be nice because that's who you are, but not because you want to like up the playing field. So you'd probably see all types of people in this industry. Does it drive you? You know, we've heard many different examples, particularly from the actors when they're dealing with, let's say, a diva or someone that's in charge and they're just an arsehole. Have you had to deal with many people like that when you've been working?
Yeah, I mean, every day. There's always, even if you're talking about producers, writers, there's always people who are more powerful than you. I mean, I don't know who the most powerful person in the world is, but it's not me. And there's a lot of people who have a lot more power than I do. And I'm not saying you have to suck up to them per se, but you have to accept the reality that what they say goes, and that, you know, if you are trying to like fight this uphill battle, like, well, I think the scene should be like this, and the person who's much more powerful you says, well, I just think it should be like this. Ultimately, it's going to be like that, whether you're the writer or not. And so, you know, you can be the person with his eye on the ball and be like, okay, let's try it that way, because they're in charge. And sometimes you're in charge and sometimes other people are in charge, and you just have to know who's the person with all the power here. It's usually not that hard to figure out, but, you know, I think especially with actors, it's so hard. The business is so much rejection, so much worse than writers, and they're treated so badly on the way up that I can understand. I don't condone it, but I can understand why some of them behave badly when they make it to the top. And, you know, it's always a pleasure to find someone who's not like that. Oh, they're so down to earth. They're such a nice, but then there's people who are just like, you know, don't look at me. So yeah, you deal with that all the time, and you totally get why they're that way. But, you know, it depends how much power they have, how you deal with that situation.
You mentioned before about like the value of self, that, for example, when you first started out, everything looked like it was going to be amazing, and your career is amazing, but everything's just going all the way up. But then you also made a comment that when there are moments in one's career when it's not always going up, the value of self can be, or the value of the ego can be really tricky, because you can't necessarily place your confidence in always just selling a script, because then when you're not selling a script, and you're not selling a script more than you are selling a script. So have you had to do additional things outside of this industry to kind of like keep the confidence alive, or keep you like motivated, or anything along those lines, just to keep you kind of like humble or true to yourself?
Not really. I mean, for me, when I'm having a slump and we're just, you know, not selling anything, or things are not going our way, you know, sure, we get depressed as much as the next person, but the only way to cure that is to just write something else. Just dive into another idea and be like, okay, well, I have a plan. This is the plan. Is this new thing is the thing. It's when a project dies, a show gets canceled, or your pitch doesn't sell, and you're crossing things off your list. Okay, this one, no, no, no. Well, what is going to get me fired up to like keep going? It's the new thing. And so it's like, okay, let's start brainstorming ideas. Let's think of something we can get excited about to get our spirits back up. But yeah, I mean, I understand also, like when you're first starting out, even when you have some initial success, it doesn't necessarily validate you in any tangible way, or in any way that's like permanent. So like you were saying, you're an accountant. I was a lawyer. Those are career fields where when you get this certificate or degree or whatever it is, no one's going to say like, well, are you really a lawyer? It's like, no, I'm a lawyer. I passed the bar. The end. There's no question of like, am I a writer, that writers deal with all the time, or like, am I a good enough writer? Am I, a professional writer. The people on Twitter have these debates all the time. Like, what does it mean to be a writer? Am I a professional writer? What if someone's only paid me $50 to like give them, a log line? I mean, we don't debate that. If you're a dentist, the dentists don't get together and say like, are you a dentist though, for real? Because it's like, there's credentials and there's a set path of how to break in. And so I don't think there's these existential crises about, am I really this thing? But in the entertainment business, there's no set path on how to break in. There's no rules of like, oh, you made it this far, now you're set for life. You might be set for life for money, but you're never set for life. Even if you're, an A-list person, there's no guarantee that you're going to keep working. If you are at the top of your game as a lawyer, you're going to be a successful lawyer for the rest of your life. If you win an Academy Award as an actor, there's no guarantee that you're ever going to make another movie. They can be like, oh yeah, they won an Academy Award 10 years ago, but what have they done lately? Like, oh yeah, they're too old now. Yeah, they're not in style anymore, whatever it is. So there's this constant fear that it's all over at any moment, no matter how successful you are. And that's true for acting. It's true for writing, directing, everything. It's like, is my career over? They don't send you a telegram saying, bad news, you're never going to work again. You just stop working and you don't know whether you're in a slump or if you're never going to work again. So it's that fear that causes you to need this validation, which there is no external validation that can prove that you're talented enough to keep working other than the next job. So that's, I think, the biggest struggle that we all have, and especially writers, that, sends us to therapy. And I mean, oh, well, here's how you deal with that. There's no answer.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like deep down, you do have a knowing that you're going to be okay. To be able to work for 20 years is incredible. There's probably hardly anyone that's been able to do it as consistently as you. And I just think that, I wrote down this point. I lost it. Oh, no. Oh, well, it's one thing to recognize fear, and fear can limit us and stop us from being creative and stop us from thinking clearly. But deep down, what I'm hearing is that you do know. And yes, there's going to be so much emotional stuff that comes up, but at some level, I'm sure you bounce ideas with your wife if one of you are being more negative than the other. But to be able to do it for 20 years, you must have something in you that knows that you are like worthy, that you're good enough, that you can keep on going. Because if you buy into the fear more times than not, I'm of the belief that will stop or hinder someone's creative process.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't know if that I have any practical advice for that, other than with time and, success over a longer period of time, it makes you feel like, okay, it's going to work out. I don't know what my next job's going to be, but back in 2015, we were in the same boat. Back in 2007, we were in the same boat, and something always comes around. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's just luck. We're pitching things at a high level. We're good at what we do. We have a lot of great ideas. We have great execution. And a lot of times we just strike out. People say no all the time. And sometimes they say yes. And it's just getting that one yes is a numbers game. It's like we always say we're like professional lottery players. We're in a low percentage business. And my old manager used to always say that anytime anyone sells anything in this town, it's like a miracle. And you just have to navigate through. It's another analogy I always think of is that it's like the scene in Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, when they're going through the trench run and they're like, the X-Wing fighters are making to the trench, and then there's all these like blasters coming at them, and then the other ships are fighting them, and they make it through all that, and they get into the trench, and one guy goes all the way through the trench, and he fires his whatever cannon thing, and it doesn't go into the hole, right? Not Luke, the other guy, the guy who fires first. He makes it through everything, and he fires his thing, and it doesn't go in. And and they're like, did it go in? He's like, nah, it didn't go in. It's like, that's what being a writer is like. You like,
That's terrifying.
Have an idea, you run it by your manager, they give you notes, they like it, you take it to producer, you talk to 20 producers, one of them says, yes, I love this. You take it to a studio, they're like, we want to buy it as an if come deal. So we're not going to pay you until we sell it to the network. And you do this, and it's a year-long process of going to all these people, and you go to the networks and they all say no. And then it's like, okay, now what? Nothing. There's no now what? It's just over. You're dead. It didn't go in. So, you just have to keep doing it. And then you go, okay, well, let's go back to the beginning and then fight these things again and go back into the trench and the guns and the ships and you just have to do it again. And you got to keep going and going and going. And then, but sometimes it goes in and sometimes they say, okay, we're going to buy it. I mean, you have to believe that that's going to happen. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
And if it happens, a few times or 10 times or 20 times, and it keeps happening over and over again in your career, not often, but once in a while, once a year, maybe, then you're like, okay, I think it's going to work out. So, I mean, that's not very good advice. It's like, just be successful for 20 years and then you'll stop worrying.
I actually think that is really good advice. And you've also spoken on another podcast. Like, I know you've got a very tight schedule of what you work through, which kind of keeps you accountable. But within that, I think you mentioned you go to gym, you walk your dog 6 times or something like that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned therapy here. All of these things all help as well. If you just, through my experience, if I'm just writing in a room isolated doing nothing, then the writing is going to suck and my life's going to suck as well. But you seem to have worked out a really stringent way of working that it can keep you accountable and you can also enjoy life. I think you finish work roughly 4 or 4:30 most days, and that you can do something like this or enjoy time with your family or enjoy your weekends. So I think something like that's really important because it does allow you to kind of play and then also take some time off.
Yeah. And look, I've been very lucky, like I've said, and I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can do this full time. It's my job. I don't have to, most people trying to break in, it's like they're going to some other job doing something else, going to work at Starbucks while they're trying to write at night. I am lucky that I've gotten to a point in my career where this is what I do full time for a living. So I can have a schedule, which is, I wake up at 6:30, I walk the dog, I am at my desk usually by 8, I write for a couple hours, maybe 2.5 hours, then I go exercise, then I go on another walk with my dog, and then I'll have lunch, hopefully with the whole family, and my wife and I might do an afternoon session, writing the same project, different project, whatever, but then we kind of wrap things up, and I usually don't work on the weekends, and I usually wrap up around 4:30. And, there's just other things in my life that are important to me. I've got a family and I've got other interests. And that's a question that always comes up in showrunner meetings when you're interviewing potential people for your room. A lot of times we'll ask them, so what are your interests outside of writing? Mm. And it trips people up a lot of times. They're like, well, I mean, I'm writing this. And I know that you're into writing. We get that. But what else? It's like, are you a professional snowboarder? I mean, what else do you do? Because you need to have interests to write about. And you need to be curious about the world to make your scripts have some substance. So, I have a lot of things that I'm interested in that have nothing to do with writing. That is my life, and writing is a huge part of it, and it's my career. But, if you're just single-mindedly obsessed with breaking in and writing a script and you're, sitting there writing 20 hours a day, I mean, there's also a marginal return. How much better is a script going to be after that many hours?
What I'm embarrassed talking about my process, but what I've found is that it's through my external activities that actually make my writing better. Not necessarily in the sense of, obviously the world experience is crucial, but getting my mind off things. So going for that walk or meeting someone or doing that other activity I play, for example, basketball, on the way to the drive, on the way there, I'm thinking of ideas. And that's where I've become a lot better, is instead of just staying at the desk the whole day, as opposed to when I did at the very start, I'm actually better, more all-rounded. And had this example, this come up a lot. A lot of the actors have received advice from their mentors or their teachers that you have to get a hobby or interest outside of life. And a lot of the actors are like, no, but this is my only hobby and this is my only interest.
Right.
And then the mentors or whoever they are will say, well, you're not going to survive in this business. And it will also be very tough mentally as well if you're that one thing. Because when you're not that one thing, then that's going to be really tough for one's ego and mind as well. But having the other things keeps you more grounded and present and allows you to enjoy life, because life is much bigger than the task that we're doing at that one particular point in time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of people trying to break in think that it's like some sort of like Iron Man competition that then they can brag like, oh, like in my old law firm, be like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter last night. I'm like, okay. And it's like, well, I wrote for 20 straight hours. I'm like, okay, I wrote for 2 hours. So who cares? It doesn't matter how many hours you work. It's like, how good is the script? And, you know, how did you get it done? Are people interested in it? You know? Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like putting in a certain number of hours at your desk. It helps you. In fact, you should get up and walk around anyway. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's good advice. Like, here's something. As I'm getting older, I have other interests, as I mentioned, and I think it's kind of a good mental exercise. If you ask my wife or my kids, even, what am I going to do when I'm retired? Like, or when my career's over, like when no one will hire me, or voluntarily or involuntarily, when I'm done being a writer and a producer, ask my kids, what is daddy going to do? They know, because I have in my head what I want to do when I'm 80. And I hope it's when I'm 80, not when I'm 60. But like, they know when I'm 80, I'm going back to school to get my PhD in linguistics.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that. That's very interesting.
Just one of my interests. I'm just fascinated with words. I listen to the linguistics podcasts all the time. Just a lot of different facets of the world. And I have no training in it whatsoever. I didn't get my undergraduate degree in linguistics, so I would probably have to go take some undergrad courses. And it's like I don't know if it's Brian May, the guitarist from Queen.
Not sure.
He went and got his PhD in astrophysics. So he has a doctorate in astrophysics, because it was like, I'm not touring anymore. So he like went, and I like was very inspiring. I was like, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just interested in the subject. And like, I have a plan of what I want to do when I retire. And so I think that as an exercise, it would be helpful to like say to yourself, well, what would I want to do after this, after I have a career, or instead of, maybe. But if you have, it's not a backup plan. It's more just like other things that I'm interested in.
It's that lady that I was telling you that got rejected a lot and has the international best-selling author. A lot of people that she interviewed, or the families that were interviewed, a lot of them, they didn't really know what to do when they'd retired or they stopped working, because they had their identity amongst being in that field. And to me, it's scary. I know a lot of people want to retire because they hate their jobs, but if you do nothing when you retire, according to this book, it can lead to like a huge decline, in the sense that you have to keep yourself busy in certain sense and do things that you love or you have enjoyment or passion. Because if you don't, I don't want to be too negative, you're in for a bit of a tough time. So I think passions and hobbies is crucial. Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to tie off is you're talking about the Twitter debates on Twitter, where what makes a writer? In your opinion, this is the most controversial question I ask. What makes someone a writer?
I don't know. I try not to wade in these debates, because it just seems like, what is to be gained by having your opinion be right or wrong on this subject? It just doesn't seem like an interesting debate. Like, because I understand the psychology of it. People want to be thought, they want to think of themselves as writer, and more importantly, they want other people to think that they are writers. So, I mean, is it, you write a screenplay, you're a writer. You write a poem, you're a writer. Is it someone paid you? If that's your definition, whatever. I mean, the question's fine, but honestly, I don't really care.
I actually wanted to hear that, because it doesn't really matter. It's about the individual. If one wants to be a writer, then they're a writer in a sense. I know that Might
But
be a
it's
bit.
like the whole idea of labeling yourself. It's like, I mean, not if you want to think of yourself as a writer, or that you only be a writer if you achieve this certain goal. To me, it's like, I don't care, first of all, but second of all, like, why do you care? It's like, why is a label important to you? I mean, I could tell you facts, like, I sold this script on this certain day for this amount of money. They made that movie. That movie turned out bad. You know, I can like give you facts of things that happened, and you know, you can have goals. Like, I want to be on a staff of a TV show. I want to sell a pilot. I want to be a showrunner one day. Those are all great goals to have. But like saying, I want to think of myself in a certain way and have other people also agree that what I think of myself is correct. It's like, just fucking write something, man.
I like that. Just go and do the work. I keep on staring at your pillows. So for those watching, the No Good Nick pillows look lovely.
Thank you.
We've briefly like spoken about this. It's an amazing achievement to create something and then actually get it made, because not all of these things get made, or you got the yes. Then you become a showrunner with your wife and you get 20 episodes, which is crazy. Then it gets cancelled, or I think that was the term. What's that like? I know we've spoken about the ego and the highs and lows, but this is something that's actually been made. It's good. It's got good feedback. It's cancelled for whatever reason. You've worked with a whole bunch of people. You would have so much passion and love for this baby. It's not even a baby. It's a fully grown adult. How did you deal with that aspect?
Well, it was devastating, first of all. I mean, I don't think that we thought, oh, we're definitely getting renewed. We were definitely nervous the whole time, because the thing about No Good Nick is that it tells a serialized story over a 20 episode arc, and the story does wrap itself up. It's comes to a resolution. In production, we were asked by Netflix to sort of create an idea for a second season, which we did, and we had a great idea for a second season, and to tease that in the finale of episode 20. So that's in the show, and there is this cliffhanger. And so we had pitched our idea for the second season to Netflix, and they seemed to really like it. And I think they genuinely did like it and would have liked a second season of the show. But, you know, it's not up to us. It's not even up to them. There's an algorithm, and there's numbers of viewers that watch the show, and other metrics that I don't even understand. The completion rate, whatnot. So when it came time to make a decision, it's not like at NBC where they just look at the Nielsen ratings and say, well, we have a good feeling about this, let's do it. At Netflix, a lot of these decisions come from the Silicon Valley side, where it's like the numbers don't justify based on the budget and the number of people that watched it and the number of people that watched all of them, whatever. Basically a computer gives you an answer. Yeah. That's oversimplifying, but it didn't get renewed. And so we were very hurt and upset. And not that anyone did anything wrong. They were upset too. By the way, you think like the network executives are like calling you up saying, your show is canceled, too bad. They're upset too. They want to keep doing the show. It's their show as well. They're the executives on that show. So they're really upset. You're really upset. The worst thing about being a showrunner is that when a show gets canceled, it's your responsibility to call everyone and tell them, including the actors. So we had to tell the department heads, hey, it was looking good, but didn't happen. We're so sorry. We have to call the actors. And we have, kid actors on our show. So you got to call their parents and say, hey, we've got the answer. Can you put, Sienna on the phone? And it's not good news. And, and then they cry and you cry. And then you have a really tough conversation and say, you were amazing. It was such a pleasure. I hope we can work on something again in the future. And I love you. And then you do it again with the next person and you call all the actors. So that's the worst. Yeah. That's devastating. Oh, I will tell you, okay, it's not actually the worst. Is a little bit worse. So calling all the actors is really, really bad. Going after a month after getting canceled to the stage, as they're tearing down the stage and seeing if there's anything you want, you can take mementos. And like as the showrunner, we took some props that we wanted from the stage, and they're just ripping down the stage that you built. And you go into the wardrobe room and go, oh, here's the shirt from episode 6. Does anyone want this shirt? I mean, because they can't use it again. It's like whatever. But I mean, they do send some of it back and do use it. But like some specific, if a costume said like the name of like the high school on it, like we would take those sweatpants and we took those sweatshirts that said the high school name on it, because like some other show is not going to have the same name. So watching them tear down your set is probably the worst. Okay, so so how do you get out of that? And we were upset for months. One thing, to Netflix's credit, that really, really softened the blow is they basically gave us another show to develop on the same phone call.
Oh, wow. Good on them.
They said, you guys are wonderful. We really enjoyed working. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The show is not going to have a second season, but we have this other idea. Are you interested in doing it? And we're like, yes. So it was like, we didn't really talk about what it was for more than like a minute. It was like, sure, we'll do that one instead. And that one wound up not getting made, but it was like, the show's canceled, it's over, devastating, but here's another job for money. So you're like, okay, well, I don't at least have to worry that like I'm also unemployed, and now I just got reemployed with a new job. So that was a huge benefit to soften the blow. And Netflix is amazing for just like that, saying like, hey, you want this other thing, it's yours. All you have to do is say yes. And we didn't like have to like go try to sell anything. You just said, we know you. If you want to do this project, we'll hire you.
That's amazing. Do you?
So that was really nice.
Is that a piano in your background?
Yes, that's it's my wife's piano. Let's see, that's right. There.
Yep.
That's the piano.
Very cool.
I actually don't play the piano, but the piano, it's like just a convenient place for it in our office.
When a show gets canceled, I've always had in my head that if a show gets canceled, it can still like come alive. And I know that never ever happens, but you hear like famous stories like Manifest, for example. I know it's a little bit different where they're on another network and then Netflix buys them. Is it possible to ever like buy back a show or buy it and change it, or another show comes in and does another season, or is that not realistic?
Well, there are a couple examples where something similar to that happened. Like if you recall, Family Guy got canceled, then came back, and then Futurama, exactly. And then there's shows that like Lucifer was on Fox, and then it got canceled, and then Netflix picked it up for 3 more seasons. I mean, not all at the same time, but it wound up doing, I think, 5 or 6 seasons, but it got canceled after 2 at Fox, and then went to Netflix. So that happens, and that creates this fervor among all the fans, because it's all they talk about. As soon as it gets canceled, they're like, well, just sell it somewhere else. Well, can't you just take it somewhere else? And they have like this 1 or 2 examples of where that's happened, and it's so unlikely. It's such a almost impossible scenario that then they're like, oh, we're going to do a campaign to save the show, and let's sign a petition to like save No Good Nick. And we appreciate that. That's awesome, but it's never going to do anything. It's never going to make a difference, because it has to do with who owns the show. So when you have a broadcast network show in the US, like Lucifer, and say Fox is the production company that makes the show and it airs on Fox and network, so it's the studio and the network. Or if you have a show like Cobra Kai produced, I think, by Sony, I believe is the TV studio, originally aired, as we may remember, on YouTube Red. That was their original season 1 error.
That's true, yeah.
YouTube Red went out of business, and Sony owns the show. Sony finances the show and licenses it to a network. Sony then takes it to where is it now? Netflix? Cobra Kai? I think so. So Fox takes Lucifer to Netflix. So you could take something that a TV studio owns and bring it to a different network. Totally possible, because the studio owns it. So you can go from a broadcast network's model where a TV studio pays for and owns a property like Friends or whatever, and then NBC airs it and licenses it. But if they don't want to air it anymore, it's like, great, we'll just take it somewhere else. You can't do that if Netflix made it in the first place. If you've already been produced by Netflix, Netflix owns it. You can't take the Netflix show and bring it to ABC.
Can you put a clause in the contract? Oh, that's unheard of.
I mean, you could, but like the thing is that it's prohibitively expensive to do that, because you would have to like pay the sort of turnaround fee. I mean, look, anything's possible. Could you, if like Netflix, say No Good Nick was like, for some reason, something happened in the universe where like there was a desire to do No Good Nick season 2 on whatever, HBO Max. And HBO Max is like, we don't care. We're going to do this show if it kills us. Well, they could certainly call up Netflix and say, hey, we want to license the rights back from Netflix and put it on our show. What's it going to cost? And Netflix could make up a number. And they could say, well, okay, if you give us $10 million, you can have it. I don't know. So anything's possible with money. But like, there's the reason why it's impossible is because it doesn't make sense for anyone else to spend the money that it would cost to do it.
Yeah.
So it's actually impossible because of the money. But I mean, if I was like Elon Musk, I could be like, hey, Netflix, I'm just going to buy the rights back from you. They're like, well, it's $20 million. I'm like, fine, here's $20 million. And great, now I own it. So yes, I could do that if I had $1 billion. The other problem people don't recognize is that it's too late. I mean, in 2019, when the show got canceled, then it was like, can we take it somewhere else? Can we take it somewhere else? And you had to explain, no, not really, sorry. But not only that, but the sets are all gone. The sets have been destroyed. The actors got older. You know, the kids that were on the show are 3 years older now. So great, just do the show where they're 3 years older. Okay, well, I guess anything's possible, but you know, everyone's moved on. All the deals are expired. Could you put the pieces back together again? I guess so. I mean, in ways that like, could you do a remake of a show that came out 20 years ago? I guess so. You know, they made Top Gun, you know, so you could do a version of anything that's like 20 years later, the original cast of so-and-so is now they're 20 years older. You could make the deal and figure out the rights, then anything's possible. But the other thing is that if the numbers were so amazing that it would make sense to do this, then they wouldn't have canceled it in the first place. The numbers were never like so through the roof that it would justify this.
But sometimes it can just be a budgeting thing as well. And there are other factors, but I hear what you're saying. It's a minefield to navigate.
Yeah.
I want to go back before we do the rapid fire segment to the very first thing we're talking about with your birthday special. We glossed over it, Ed. I know you're making jokes that you get a lot out of it, but selfishly get out of it. I know that you're joking. You actually have inspired so many people as well in that regard, me being included, but also other people to see that there are like good people out there, and that you mentioned like paying it back forward in a sense. And it does create a culture within writers and hopefully people in the industry of wanting to help each other with no like real, inverted commas, tangible benefits. Why did you actually, I know you mentioned that it was like COVID and you wanted to give out, but to actually read that many scripts and to read through all the legal stuff, because we have to sign stuff, that is still like a big decision to make. Did you feel that you got a lot out of it? Because, for example, you mentioned at the start, when someone says like, thank you, they get more out of it than you do from reading it. And I'm one example of the many people. I just want to know like more about this, because I just think it's so great and creates a great culture of writers and paying back forward.
Well, I think I won't take credit for coming up with the idea. I think what happened was in 2019, when the Writers Guild got into the dispute with the agencies, and it was the ATA dispute, and the Writers Guild ordered all the writers to fire their agents. So we were all left without agents. And the big concern back then was, how are they going to do network staffing without any agencies to submit? And so some other really smart and talented writers came up with this idea of a solidarity challenge. Liz Alper and some others. And they basically enlisted a bunch of upper level TV writers to volunteer to read writers. And they made a grid of like the ones that got a lot of shout outs. Like if you liked it, you would put it on their list. And if they got a bunch of people said that the script was great, then they would show up. And it turned out to be incredibly successful. And in some, maybe not even a small way, helped us win that dispute against the talent agents, because it was proven that you didn't need them, because all you needed to do is have a list of people whose scripts had been vetted, and the networks hired off of that list. So that idea wasn't mine, but I did meet with them and I did help them back in 2019. Because of my former legal training, I wrote the release, the legal release for the submissions. So I said, here, just have them sign this so that everyone's protected. So like the people volunteering to read it don't get sued if they have something similar. So we made everyone sign these releases that I had drafted, and we kind of like streamlined the process. We had a lunch meeting where we like kind of figured out how to do it in a more efficient way. And so that sort of wound down. And by the way, part of that was to really help underrepresented groups. So that was, really important. And then when during the Black Lives Matter, not that is over by any means, but during the height of that, we kind of, a lot of us, not just me, sort of segued into like, let's do the same thing, the Solidarity Challenge that was supposed to help people get staff jobs, but do it with an aim towards helping underrepresented groups. So that became kind of like a Black Lives Matter movement in, I think, 2020 to kind of read scripts for that. So the idea of reading scripts just to help out was always out there. And again, obviously I didn't invent the idea of reading people's scripts to help people. But then I periodically will keep doing it. Like, so I have my Twitter DMs open, and like sometimes, if I meet someone or whatever, I'll say, okay, you can send me the script, and I'll like read someone's script, give them notes or whatever. So then last year when I decided to do this, where I opened it up and said, I'm now accepting submissions, it was like a huge floodgates open because no one had really been doing it. And like I said, I got about 600 submissions. And it was overwhelming at first because I was like, thought I was going to get like 30 or 40. And I quickly realized I wouldn't be able to read that many, and I was going to disappoint a lot of people. But, people understand that theirs didn't get chosen. And, I did the best I could. And it's obviously no one's faulting me for not reading more of them. But, people just really appreciate it. And even the funny thing is the people whose script I didn't read, I said, oh, look, I didn't get to yours. And, I'm done reading, the week's over, and I never got to yours. And people are like, that's okay. I really appreciate that you're doing this for anyone at all, even if it wasn't me. People were like happy that someone's script got read, even if it wasn't them. So I don't know. It just feels like, I think there's a responsibility to a certain extent for upper level writers to help out people, especially underrepresented groups, because of the history of this business being white males hiring their buddies. And that is still a lot of how the hiring process works. And, we're trying to change the culture, and we're trying to like make things better. And if you can do a little bit of volunteer work to like help out, I mean, like, I don't have to tell you that we're in a crisis situation here in this country. And if you can do something to like help things, I think you have a responsibility to do it.
I agree. That is very well said. You should do a TED talk in that regard. And as we said, it does change the culture. And I would have just been happy that I was just happy that you did this. So then when you actually read mine and shouted me out, I was like, this actually changed. First of all, I mentioned confidence and my perception of the industry, but it's bigger than that. It is changing and creating a great culture, which I really appreciate. So
yeah.
What we're going to do...
Can I say one thing about that? And I think that there's kind of like Twitter, I think, gets a bad rep for being like a lot of trolls, a lot of people like writing annoying replies. But the subset of Twitter, which is screenwriting Twitter, is actually really, really nice. And it's very nurturing. And like people are like, I placed in this competition, and people are like, congratulate. And it's just, people are sharing advice. And I think that there is a great culture of people helping each other in the screenwriting community. And like, I give advice all the time. I like went through this last winter, a contract for writing and producing a pilot. And I went paragraph by paragraph saying, no one's ever going to tell you this. This is what this stuff means. And it's like, took me like 3 weeks, but I was like, meticulous details, like, here's what paragraph 11 means. And people found that incredibly helpful. I do threads periodically, like on how to like do a staffing meeting, how to interview for an agent, how to do this, how to do that, like stuff that they don't teach you in film school kind of stuff. And a lot of other upper level writers do that as well. And so if you know where to look and you follow the right people, there's so much information out there that's incredibly useful that we didn't have back when I started out.
Well, I'm not that well connected in the writing world, more so with like actors or what's well connected, it doesn't even matter. But the feedback that I got, just the amount of messages that I got from people I've never heard of, like congratulations for the shout out from your competition. And it was just really nice. It wasn't people like being jealous. They're like, congratulations. They don't know who I am. They don't need to send that to me whatsoever. Right. And I was like, wow, that's a really nice thing to do. And there was a little bit of talking amongst the people that had placed, if you want to call it that. And people were just so happy for one another. And I was just like, wow, even if they didn't get placed, they were still sending out, like, that is awesome. And my Twitter is so negative. I've been unfollowing stuff, but your page, and we'll plug it at the end, is like the best page that I have on Twitter because it's purely about writing. It's not a negative thing. It's just an empowering, positive thing. And I really appreciate it. And I know a lot of people, even non-writers, appreciate it. So yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do to wrap up this podcast is do a rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, but if you need time to think about it, then that's completely fine.
Let's do it.
So the first one, we both come from Jewish backgrounds, and I'm assuming a lot here, so please correct me if I'm wrong. What was that moment like when you quit law and telling your parents that you quit law?
Not good. They thought I was crazy. You're throwing away your legal career. Like, and not only that, but the money that I spent on tuition going to law school. But to be fair, they also knew how unhappy I was. So I think deep down they got it. Of course, when I sold my first script, they're like, I always believed in you.
Yeah, I've heard that on every single podcast. And then, is it true that by the end, when you already knew you were going to leave, that your hours kept being cut and cut and cut, and then you're like seeing movies at the end of the day?
Absolutely true.
I'm so proud of you.
I was like I wrote a whole script about it. That's one of my best samples, but it's, I was like pulling all sorts of scams, walking in circles just to pass the time. I was like, I'd leave the lights on in my office and turn on like the radio and put my coat on my chair and then go home. And so they would think I was still there. I went to see a movie in the middle of the day with my briefcase. I was in the movie theater with a briefcase. Yeah, I was like really, really bad. But the funny thing is that they track your hours at a law firm. And when they saw my hours go down, and I'd already gotten into film school, so I was just sticking around to like earn enough money to pay for it. And so the partner comes to my office one day and says, your hours are way down this month. And I was panicked and I didn't know what to say. So I just blurted out, I know. And he was like, right, so you need to work more hours. I was like, yeah, I know. I need to work way more hours. And I just kept agreeing with him. And he was so confused by me agreeing that he was like, okay, I guess we understand each other. And it was like this sort of panicky genius thing where like, if you just agree with the person, then you're not arguing.
It's actually really, first of all, you would have been a great writer for Seinfeld. You would have given George so many different storylines of how to avoid work. But we actually had a teacher. He was a horrible teacher in the sense of he didn't actually teach. But he said every time the principal would call him into the office and say he's doing a terrible job, he'd just be like, you are right. I'm going to work on it, and never actually do anything. And because he was so agreeable, they couldn't actually get rid of him until the end. Yeah. And I know, and I just think that's geniuses. Oh, that's so good. Next question. What are you most proud of in your life?
Well, I mean, my whole life, I think I'm most proud of my kids. That's sort of, I think family is going to always supersede your career. I think in my career, I think No Good Nick is my crowning achievement because it's the thing that we produced in a way that is closest to our original vision. It's pretty much what we wanted. Netflix gave us notes, but when you're the showrunner of a show, you're the CEO of the whole production. And I've never had a film made that was, that close to what I wanted, except maybe the one I directed. Whereas No Good Nick, that one, it is what it is. And if you love it, if you hate it, either way, that's what I wanted.
That's awesome. I'm not going to comment on them because I'll derail them. But I believe you were also writing this film, which in your words wouldn't really work in this time. And I think you had Chris Farley as the lead. Can you tell me a bit about that?
So when I was still a lawyer, and I got into film school and producing, I didn't know what being a producer was. So that summer I wrote a script because I thought that everyone would have a script. I didn't really understand the difference between writer and producer. So this is in 1997. Chris Farley was still alive. And in the 90s, big high concept comedy ideas were the way that those are the kind of movies that got made, like Liar, Liar. So simple, high concept ideas. And so I had an idea for a movie that it was an overweight guy wakes up in an alternate universe where overweight people are the standard of beauty and the thin people are the ones that are kind of, shunned by society. So, long story short, Chris Farley's wearing spandex. He's walking down the street and they're playing Staying Alive and he's, strutting his stuff. So it's Chris Farley,
Awesome.
At a karaoke bar singing Do You Think I'm Sexy? And it was like the simplest, but it was good. It was a funny script for what it was of that era. If I had written it and moved to Hollywood a year earlier, easily would have gotten Chris Farley, would have gotten his movie, because when I showed up at USC with that script, I had my one script in hand, everyone wanted to read it. And the producer in the program with me that got me my first agent wound up being my wife. So my wife of 22 years got me my first agent, and I was repped at Paradigm in like weeks after showing up in LA with that one script, because they're like, oh, I mean, it wasn't the greatest script or anything, but it was so simple that that's what they made in those days. They were like, oh, we just need to get this to Chris Farley and then we'll start making it. It was like such a no-brainer. But then of course he died and that derailed the whole, obviously you couldn't make it without him. So that project never happened. But,
Would it not still be made with tweaks? Like the concept's still very interesting.
It's interesting, but like they've tried different versions of it in different ways. There was the Amy Schumer type version. There was Shallow Hal.
Oh yeah,
they've been trying to do things. I just think that it's too simplistic for today. It would have been a good 90s movie.
Yep. And then talking about, you were the guy, I have in my notes, you were known as the go-to guy for teen sex comedy movies. Why?
Well, it was not by choice. I wrote the Chris Farley movie and it was PG-13 and that was kind of my sensibility. But that one, when he died, then I wrote another script that didn't sell. And so my manager said, try writing something R-rated, because that is when I told you before American Pie was about to come out. And I said, okay, I'll try that. And so when Slackers sold and then I got American Pie 2, then I was teen sex comedy guy. And so then I did National Lampoon's Barely Legal, and I actually wound up writing 3 American Pie movies. And so I wrote a Porky's movie that didn't get made, the Porky's remake. So I was like the person to go to that. And it wasn't real. I mean, I don't mind writing it. I had some funny ideas in that area, but it's like, it becomes a little bit repetitive. And it's like, there's only so many bodily fluids and orifices and permutations that you can come up with. And it's like, and also in retrospect, as the world has changed, none of that stuff holds up because it's all 100% from the male point of view. Women are objects for conquest. Men are trying to have sex with women. Women don't want to have sex with the men. So the men have to like trick them or do something to get the woman to have sex with them. So the whole concept of the genre is completely like archaic and like kind of embarrassing in retrospect, that like we didn't know at the time that we were writing something that was stupid. But in retrospect, in 2022, those movies are all stupid and terrible. And like even American Pie, which maybe has some funny stuff, is still about 4 guys who are all virgins who's like make a pact to lose their virginity by prom. The whole idea of it is stupid. In retrospect, at the time, it seemed like a good idea. So anyways, so I did those for a while and, they paid the bills, and then I, segued into other things. I did animation. I wrote Puss in Boots. I did a Tinkerbell movie, and then I moved into TV. And so, you don't always choose what subgenre. You might say, I'm a comedy writer, I'm a drama writer, whatever, but you don't always necessarily choose exactly where your career is going to go.
I heard you say that as well. And just for fun, I've written like an animation. I've written mainly sitcoms. I have like a drama. I have a comedy sci-fi. I've written a sci-fi adventure movie just to kind of like test my mind. And it's very interesting that, we might want to be the one thing, but the world or the industry might have different plans for us. And I think that's really important. So this is a twofold question. I believe you entered Yale at 16. Are you a genius?
How do you answer that question? I did go to Yale early. I skipped some grades and didn't graduate high school, just went straight to college. But I feel like I try to be objective, my intelligence. I feel like I'm right in that perfect zone of like very smart, but not so high on the bell curve that I have a hard time relating to other people. I think I'm empathic and I can communicate well with anyone.
Right.
And so I think the problem is when you really go off the charts, and we have a lot of experience. My wife and I homeschooled, and we have a lot of friends in the homeschool community. And some of the kids that we know are really, like way smarter than I ever was. And I think that at some of those upper limits, it's becomes challenging because they find not a lot of commonalities with other kids. So I think I'm just dumb enough to be likable.
You're humble. And if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to answer it. Why have you decided to homeschool your children?
They just needed to do things their own way. We started very early. Like our son quit regular school in third grade. He just, wanted to like study. He was really into math, and he wanted to do in chemistry, and he wanted to like do things that they wouldn't let him do. So we're like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to do it on our own then. And so our kids just, they want to go at their own pace. They don't want to, and it's not like they're advanced in every subject. It's just when you homeschool, it's not like we're Amish. They're chained to a desk and like we're teaching them religious, like the world's 4,000 years old. It's like modern homeschooling is we don't teach any of the courses. It's all online, or there's communities where the parents get together and hire teachers. It's a whole thing that's not what you necessarily think it is. But it just enables kids to like choose their own curriculum. And I'll give you a small example. I won't talk for an hour about homeschooling, but like in America, you have to take math in a certain order. It's algebra, geometry, maybe trigonometry, pre-calculus, calculus. Like someone decided that's the way to do it. Science, you take biology, chemistry, physics. That's the order of science in American high schools. I don't know why it's that way. So there's other sciences and there's other maths that you could take that are not those subjects. So my daughter took probability when she was, 8 or 9 or something. It's like, why don't they teach that? That's much more useful than, geometry or algebra. So she took probability. It was a fascinating course. They took marine biology. They took astronomy. Why don't they teach astronomy in high school? It's never taught. There's a lot of sciences that are out there in the world. If you go to a university, there's all these sciences that they didn't teach you in high school. And in a homeschooling community, you could say, oh, I don't want to do that one. I want to do that one. And you could be like, okay, well, we'll just find that course and we'll get it for you.
I've actually been looking into it. I don't have kids, but I fully agree with everything that you said. School is not a one-fit model. And we'll have to talk about this another time, but just as a very brief summary, that each individual learns at a different pace, and it kind of forces you to be in this mold of individual, and everyone's very different. And I do think the school system needs to change in certain areas. And I think homeschooling you've done well can be brilliant. I've met a few people and their kids are phenomenal, and it's a small sample, but I think it's actually really awesome. So I'm glad that you bring that up. Last few, and you navigate this how you want. I'm sure you get this a lot, and I don't want to go into your personal life with your wife, but how do you find navigating working with your wife?
Well, I think to me, it's great because like in a marriage where you have a stable relationship, it gives you the freedom to disagree and the freedom to get into a fight and not be like, well, maybe we're going to throw the whole thing out. Like if you're just like dating and you get into a fight, that could be the end of the whole relationship. But if you're married and you're committed to relationship, so we have a much more stable foundation, I think, than if you just have some writing partner that's like a buddy or something. It does make it so that, we might get into a bigger fight or have a more serious disagreements about things. But that it's always going to work out at the end, that we're not going to, the fight's not going to escalate when you disagree about something. And the other good thing is that we're always available to like talk about things. Like I can, wake up I don't do this, but I could wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my God, I've got a new idea. And I could be like pitching it right there. I don't have to like wait till the morning. I can pitch things whenever and have ideas all day long. We a lot of times when we're trying to brainstorm, when we're writing, and we'll say, okay, we're stuck. Let's go for a walk, and we'll walk the dog together, and we'll figure it out on the walk.
Oh, that's awesome. And what would you do if you knew you could not fail?
If I knew I couldn't fail, man, I guess I would not worry as much. I'd yeah, no, that's a tough question to answer. I wonder if the first thing that came to my mind is like, would I write fewer scripts? I guess I'd probably just write like one a year and be like, well, it's going to work, so I don't need to write the other 10.
True.
That would probably be that'd probably be a bad thing, because like the fear of failure is what keeps me so productive.
Ooh, okay, we have to do a part 2 to get into that. Biggest pet peeve?
I mean, I've got a million of them right now. My biggest pet peeve is that whenever I'm walking the dog, there's always nails in the street.
Oh, what?
The construction workers just like drop nails all the time. And there's like our cars in our neighborhood are constantly getting flat tires because there's nails everywhere.
Wow. Okay.
I probably thought it was going to be a pet peeve about writing, but no.
No, that's at the top. That's crazy.
Screws, nails. I have a little thread on Twitter. It's a little obscure one, doesn't have a lot of interest, but if you look deeply in my Twitter, you'll find my nails and screws thread where I like pick up and I'm like, look at this screw I found.
I will look at it. I actually can't believe that. I know that you're married, but if you're on Tinder, what would your bio say about you?
Well, I guess I would probably have to say like super successful, wealthy, showrunner, writer, producer, director, just like as many things as possible to like get potential interest from people, because, I don't know if like my physical appearance would be enough to really like seal the deal. So I'd have to like use my.
Firstly, you're a handsome man. You could just go the old photoshopping route and just put you on like Brad Pitt like 20 years ago.
I'll tell you the one thing I have thought about this. The one thing I would say on any profile for dating is I would have to say like in like asterisks right on top, I'm only 5'4". If this is an issue, don't read the rest of this, because I get it. I'm super short. I know how tall I am, and that's a deal breaker for many, many women. And like, just don't like waste my time if you're going to find out that that's too short for you. Because I went on a traumatic date when I was in my 20s with a woman who was 5'11", and wasn't an issue with me. I was like, oh, she's a beautiful, tall woman. And I met her at a party, and I was like, would you like to go out sometime? She was like, yeah, absolutely. And we went out, and then date went great. Went to kiss her. She's like, oh, no, you're just way too short for me. I'm like, but you knew how tall I was when we met. It wasn't like we were lying down. And so that was kind of traumatizing.
I have a few Jewish friends as well that are of similar heights, and it's not all doom and gloom. You found your wife and you've got children, so that's all good. Any advice, and I know you've given throughout, any advice you'd like to give people who want to try something different on you, but perhaps are fearful of doing so?
Well, I mean, I guess the only advice I would say about that is that if you box yourself in, you're limiting your opportunities. I think I don't like to publicize this, but we almost never say no. If someone offers us something, we're like, well, let's try it. This isn't like normally our thing, but if the money's okay, like, let's give it a shot. So, we're supposed to like say that, oh, we say no to everything, so we seem more desirable. But the truth is, if you have an opportunity to do something different, that just creates more opportunities. So if you're like, well, I only write half hour, well, then write an hour. If you're a horror writer, try writing. And people say, well, no, you have to have, your one thing, because you have to brand yourself and have your wheelhouse. But like, what if someone reads something of yours and like, well, but do you have a horror sample? I know that's a weird question, but like, well, yes, I do. I think that like, and you might find out that you like that even better. So, like I said earlier, this is a numbers game, and your best script's probably not going to be the one that sells. It's going to be sort of random, and you can't control what the industry does with your script after you write it. So you got to have a lot of at-bats, to use the American baseball analogy. You want to have as many opportunities as possible. And that means being open to different genres, different, animation, kids, movies, TV. I wouldn't say, no, I just want to do this one thing. You want to do that one thing as your, number one goal, but like, what about 2, 3, and 4?
Very interesting. Before we ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, what is the one question I should have asked you?
That one. I don't know. That seems like a trick question. I can't answer.
Is there anything that springs to mind? Anything you want to tie up?
No, I mean, I just feel like I just talk so much. I can't imagine that there's something that I wanted to say that I didn't say, because if I wanted to say it, I already said it.
Very nice. Before we go, how can people follow you? You have the best Twitter account in the Twitter universe, and keep up to date with all the amazing things that you do.
So my Twitter is at David H. Steinberg. You have to use the H because I'm not the other guy, and people constantly are like, "Oh, I loved you on Johnny Carson." I'm like, "No, I'm not 80. I'm David H. Steinberg," and it's the same handle for Instagram. Although my Instagram's sort of stupid. It's just some pictures from No Good Nick. It's not my main area of interest. But on Twitter, I just dole out advice. I answer questions. People DM me. I'm pretty active in the screenwriting community. So at David H. Steinberg on Twitter is like the main place to like get your David Steinberg related content.
Awesome. That will be in the episode notes below. You're amazing, an absolute mensch. I appreciate you and all the positive goodwill that you put out to the universe. I really appreciate this, and we're going to have to chat again sometime soon.
Thank you.
I love David's mindset on succeeding in the long term. He explains how often we want instant success. However, this can actually impede long-term success. What this boils down to is putting yourself in the best position to succeed for as long as possible, without taking shortcuts or avenues which will limit oneself long-term. David gave the brilliant example of how he accepted a job for less money and responsibility, with the strong belief that this would be an investment for his career and pay dividends in the future. As David said, it was the greatest decision of his life. And as it turned out, he learned new skills, refined his own knowledge, and met great people along the way. He goes one step further and encourages us to look more holistically at what success could mean to us, and even gives advice on how to achieve it, including what might seem quite simple but is really quite crucial, including being kind to people, working at one's goals, being a team player, easy to work with, as well as being a problem solver. My takeaway is, if I'm wanting to achieve a task or a goal, I now ask myself, will it enhance me or will it hinder my ability to succeed in the long term? So I'll leave you with this epic quote by Ernest Hemingway. "It is good to have an end to journey toward, but it is the journey that matters in the end." Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.